everybody, and welcome to the New Earth Co-Creators podcast. We are here today to have another interesting and impromptu conversation regarding community and co-creation and the New Earth. And I'm here, of course, with I'm Deborah Bishop, and I'm here with the lovely Isabel Hunt, who is going to start today off with, I believe, a quote, because the quote is going to kind of spurn this conversation. So,
That's right.
by all means, please.
Well, the quote is the secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new, which was embodied and spoken by, I say Socrates, because obviously I'm German and I have my Latin certification. Everyone else probably calls it Socrates. So
Well, Socrates, so that people
but
kind of
Socrates.
know. But yes,
Yes.
the Latin pronunciation in Latin is, my father spoke Latin, so it was always interesting to hear how that
Yeah.
worked. But however anybody relates to it, that quote is fascinating because it literally says, you can't create new with old.
Yeah.
So
Very
then how
much
do you
so.
create?
And I mean, it makes sense, if you look at, let's say, oh, I have something in my throat.
It's fun when that happens.
Oh, I know.
And there's actually someone that some people might follow too. Dr. Joe Dispenza speaks a lot about you can't bring the same personality to what you want in life. You actually have to change aspects of your personality if you want to change what's happening in your world.
Right. It's like with anything, let's see if I can find a really practical example. Let's say you have someone cooked you a meal and you hate that meal and you just focus on why you're hating this and this doesn't taste good. You only focus on that while in your head you're like, but I want to eat something else. But are you doing something? Are you shifting your focus away from what you don't want to actually going and making yourself something if that's what you want? Right? I mean, that's like an incredibly simple, practical example of what it means if we continue to focus on fighting the old. We're not able to actually build the new. And we see it a lot with activism. I've done an interview a couple months ago about is what we're fighting for actually the right thing? Because often what we're really passionate about in being active against, even if it's environmental activism, if it's social activism, we're usually focusing on the problem, and we're getting so wrapped into it that it becomes our identity to be that kind of activist, right? And then at the same time, we actually subconsciously don't really want to find a solution, because then if we were to find a solution, that what we put our identity into is suddenly taken away, and we have nothing to be an activist for or against.
It reminds me of a situation. I used to do a lot of events for peace. So they were basically peace rallies.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a whole thing happening here where, the Department of Peace and Nonviolence was very, very forward at that time and trying to get everybody's signatures and all that kind of thing. And so I started producing events that were basically artists for peace and so forth.
Yeah.
And I got invited by another large organization here, very well known organization here, so I won't mention names, that wanted me because they knew the different events that I'd produced, the different shows that I was doing, wanted me to collaborate with them to produce an anti-war rally. Right. So there I met with them, and they're met in a church basement, and there was like 14 of them and one of me sitting around the table. And I said, I will work with you if you call this a peace rally. I will not work with you if you call this an anti-war rally. And it took 3 hours And I had people that were vets and everything in there that didn't know how. I said it with, I said, with all due respect to everybody that's wrapped up in all of this, and to those who serve, I respect those who serve immensely, for the fact that they do put their life on the line for things that, they believe in. And,
Yeah.
that's an amazing thing, and it costs them everything. So I say this with all due respect to the individuals that may be part of this reality. Had to explain to these people, though, that it was like, look, but as long as we're anti-war, we're fighting the war, and you can't get peace through fighting. As long as we're fighting for anything, we will never achieve peace because we're
Yeah.
fighting.
Okay.
So we run into these really interesting things because, the English language, it's my mother tongue, so I don't know a lot of other ways. I just know that the English language can be very limited. It's the language of commerce. It doesn't have a lot of emoting words to it. It can be very cut and dry. So we do things like, well, we need to fight for this. And for me, it's like we need to find a better way, because that word has a frequency and has a vibration. And as much as it's just a word and we understand how we're using it, when we talk about doing things differently, we actually require taking it down to that level where it's like, okay, if I'm not fighting for this, what am I doing? Right?
Yeah.
What can that be?
Yeah.
And I believe that's kind of what we're talking about. And eventually we did get to do the peace rally. Yay.
Yeah.
However, it was really interesting to have 14 people who were just absolutely beside themselves that we were not going to call this anti-war, because of just where they're at, what they were thinking about, which goes to what you were saying, as you get into these places and you don't really realize what you're actually aligning with.
Yeah. As a sociologist, you are more focused on the whole, on the group dynamic instead of the individual itself, even though then there's my psychology background who does that, so I can bring it together. But it is interesting if you look at the energetic components, if you just look at reports about certain activism in certain areas, you can feel the difference. I remember Mother Teresa has said it too, right? I will never participate in anti-war movements, but I will if it is for peace. Because she also knew energetically what we want to create is what we need to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
I say to people, if like even with the current situation, we probably, many of us have watched the news with the UFOs and what was shot down and yada, yada, yada. Everything people have predicted 2 to 3 years ago are slowly happening. And honestly, while this is our reality, but I'm really questioning is if because we predicted it, we're also creating it.
Well, and I'm cautious when we say this is our reality. It's not my reality. I don't
Right.
choose to take
Yeah.
ownership over this reality. It is a reality that is happening
Yeah.
in the world at this time. And those who are completely focused on it are living in that reality because they're so focused on it, they don't realize that it is a reality. It doesn't have to be their reality. And this is a very confusing conversation to most people. It's even confusing to me to understand how
Sometimes we
to
need to
live,
have those. Yes.
right? But it's like the thing of just trying to explain, like, okay, but we can live in different places at the same time. Things can happen simultaneously.
Yeah.
That's happening all the time. There are people living in absolute awareness and joy and abundance, whatever that means to them, at the same time that there are people living in abject pain and fear and despair. It's all happening
At the
at
same time.
exactly the same time.
Yeah. Because there is only now,
Mm-hmm.
right? When we talk about the illusion of time. And it's really there's always a lot of people, when I talk about creating the new, where people are like, oh, you're so ignorant to what's going on, or you just don't want to see it, you just don't want to see the reality of it. And I keep telling them, but it's just not what I want in my life. This is not what I want to create. This is not what I want to instill into my son, who is 9, who is now at this age where he's very impressionable, um, figuring out where he belongs, where he fits in, and how he wants to express himself. And within that dynamic, I do not want him to have to focus on all that particular reality that is so full of division and hate and destruction, right? I want him to embody what is possible in building the new. And while he is able to do that, he will have other children, other people who are just like, I like how you think, I like how you feel, I want to join you, I don't want the other thing. And then that's when we really create a different reality for a larger part of the collective. And the bigger that part becomes, the more the shift will happen altogether. There will always be people who will never really realize what's happening or what they can actually create and have the power to create. But there is a large group of people who are ready, right? Who are ready
There
to
are
build
who are
something
trying
new.
to find each other, and
Yeah.
hopefully you're finding each other with this community, and hopefully, well, soon we'll have a bigger and bigger reach to where they can't help but know that this is an option and out there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that just, to those who maybe have never heard of the New Earth Co-Creators, this is just a space that, yes, it has its own economy, it has a bunch of really cool things. And if nothing else, if this is nothing else, that's like, oh, I don't know, and whatever, this is a place you can actually come and reawaken your own sort of faith in humanity, because
Yeah.
there's so much good also happening in this world, but we don't get to hear about it, right? Because mainstream media doesn't support it. The agendas that happen to be playing out there right now just don't seem to support it. Social media is very censored to a degree that it keeps pushing agendas, or if it doesn't do that, it's commoditizing you to such a point that it's just, buy this, think that, get this next thing, and you've got to do this now, and oh, did you
Yeah.
hear about this, and you meant to buy that vitamin or that supplement or this drink, or so there's just like, it gets blown up, you get sort
Yeah.
of blown out of the water by all of that. And here's this space that, yes, technology is part of how we connect, which allows us to be global. However, it's also people just uplifting people for the sake of it, not for any other reason, just for the sake of lifting each other up
Yeah.
and saying there is a better way. And all of us are pioneers at this point in time. Everybody on this planet is a pioneer, whether they recognize it or not. And
Yeah.
pioneers, by definition, go into the unknown. They create in the space of the unknown. And where we can lose individuals is by the safety of the unknown, right? Because
Yeah.
there is no safety as far as they're concerned in the unknown. And yet, to me, that's the safest place to be, because if we're in the unknown, then we get to create and see how it flows and happens. If we're in the known, then we only get what we've always had.
Exactly. I mean, that's really what it is. It's something I've noticed. I think, I don't know, it was over the weekend where I posted something in our group about what is actually your dream, and nobody responded to it. And I realized that most people don't know what it is to build the new. What
Mhm.
does it look like? What does it feel like? They think they do, yet they're still trying to build within the old. You can't, if you want to build and create something new, you cannot stay energetically and emotionally in the old trying to build something new while you're focusing on the old. It just doesn't work that way. Like, your body is like, whoa, those are all conflicting messages. And so the universe is responding with, well, then let's just create some conflicting messages for you. That's what you really want to focus on, right? We've all experienced it. If we're not clear within our direction of where we want to go, the universe automatically is like, okay, well, until you make a decision, we're just going to take you wherever you choose to go, because it
Yeah,
feels like,
random.
yeah, random, whatever. And it can get really exhausting. And when we're in this survival space, we cannot focus on what we actually want to create. And I have to say, even when I looked at the question after it was posted, I'm like, you know what? What actually do I want in my life? Right now, I'm so into let's build this, let's bring people together. But what do I want for me?
Right.
I am very clear on what I want for humanity, but also as visionaries, we tend to forget, what about me? What do I want for my life? What do I want my life to look like so that I can become part of that bigger vision, like really being a substantial part as an individual to shift the collective as well, because it is always an individual um the focus on ourselves that shifts the collective.
Well, it's individual consciousness. It's how we are designed as
Yeah.
well. And also what you just touched on, I think, is why we have so many, why people don't like, what do you dream? And I think, unfortunately, that's become kind of a trite thing. Like, everybody getting out there, you can have your dream, and
Yeah.
and so it goes. But also, I think it's a product of the fact that I think we have a considerable amount of wounded visionaries.
Mm,
And the reason
yeah.
that they're wounded is because of that equation. I will save you. I will save this planet. I will make it all better for everybody else. I will do all of these things. And when all of that is done, then maybe I will
Time.
be okay too. Right. And it's the other way around. It's I'm okay. I'm okay. So if I'm okay, then the world is okay.
Yeah.
And now I can move in the world as if it is okay and do the things that I would naturally do as somebody who's whole, who sees others as whole, who sees this earth as whole. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done with individuals who have the heart and the soul and the mind to go forth and do amazing things, but who are so wounded that they're tired and exhausted and even skeptical about what really can be done because they feel so beaten up.
And yeah, and they probably have been within similar positions over lifetimes and lifetimes and generations, all of that coming together because the soul is still trying to figure out how to be that visionary by really stepping into a place of love for yourself first.
And being criticized and made wrong also, right?
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that a lot of visionaries, people with heart for service and so forth, who want to see a better way, they get, I've been called a Pollyanna on many an occasion.
Yeah.
You're just a Pollyanna. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'd rather be that. If that's what you want to call it, I'd rather be that. And the thing that's really interesting is because I choose carefully, consciously, as often as possible. And believe me, I don't always get it right by any stretch. But a friend of mine used to say 51% of the time you're ahead of the game, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, 51, we go for the 51%. It's this reality of just like, what would I prefer? I can watch things and see what's out there, and I very much limit my scope and I move in directions of things that I feel are vetted, that I can trust. But even there, there's holes, there's things that get through that are not really accurate, or so
Yeah.
I just, I balance things out with an awareness of like, oh, isn't that interesting? Because for me, it's interesting. Like, oh, this is happening. Oh, there's these robots. Well, now that's interesting, isn't it? And then the awareness of like, at the end of it all, for me, the light prevails. It always does. The love prevails. It always does. The planet is whole, and healed and well, and the rest of this is all a grand illusion, getting us through whatever our own journeys are.
Yeah.
Um, I just think we can either go through it in isolation, which really doesn't allow for any of us to express what we're really here to express. Isolation just doesn't do that.
No,
Or we
especially
can
in
do it together.
isolation, you can lose yourself too, right? You start to kind of mix up the heart with the head and you try to find rational, explanations and justifications why things they are the certain way and why you're meant to do something else. When you get into your head, that's not where we can really make a difference.
Uh-uh.
And I think you really tapped onto something very, very important where a lot of people do really great things. But again, they put themselves into that savior position. I'm here to save the world. And by that mindset, if you, and that might be confusing for a lot of people, but if you're here to save the world, you will always create scenarios where you think you have to save the world from. Just to just to continue to be able to embody the savior
Well,
complex.
exactly. If you expect, I just went through this with a partner of mine that we have a project together, and it's been a push and pull, right? We've
Mm.
had this push and pull, and so we were talking about it, and one of the things she said to me was like, "Well, I'm just, I'm going to exaggerate it." So she didn't say this exactly, but she said, "I'm just afraid to do this because when I do this, this is going to happen." And I went, "Okay, we got to stop talking right now because I have no opportunity to be any different to you because you're already seeing me this way. So no matter how I'm responding, in your mind, I'm responding that way.
Mm.
And I there's no place for me to go because then you're reacting to something that I'm actually not doing, right? Hence what
Mm.
happens between individuals and communication, why texting can be so damaging, and this reality of we don't talk to each other anymore, we don't communicate because we're all interpreting what somebody's saying, thinking we know what they mean. And for a lot of individuals, what they're interpreting is from the past and from their own life experiences and from when something bad happened or somebody said
Yeah.
something. And so now that looks familiar, so the auto response is this is that. We don't need to
Yeah.
even think about it. This is that because that's how it was back there. And that's what we're talking about today with that quote. And, you know, there's the reality of what's been done has been done. And we can do it over and over and over again. And indeed, there's a mass part of our population, right, that does do it over and over and over again
Yeah.
because they're asleep. They've got the sickness that I call it a sickness on this planet. It has nothing to do with health. It has to do with awareness, and it's greed. They're bitten by the greed.
Yeah.
They're witnessing that as the only way, right? So that is happening. However, along with that, at the same time, are people who are going, that makes no sense.
I feel like there's this, again, we're getting into this harmony of we are in a dualistic world. This is what
Yes.
where we exist, right? And really, the beauty is finding the harmony between the two sides of things. And even within that, it is important to look back and say, oh, this is what happened, and this is why I responded the way I did, and this is how it showed up for me. But a lot of people hold on to that and then they go through it over and over and over instead of again building the new. They're focusing on fighting the old, fighting themselves pretty much, right? You start to
Mhm.
fight yourself and won't even allow yourself to create something new. And so the balance really is between realizing what's happening, reflecting on it, and moving through it and letting it go, like learning from it. What is the lesson in this? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I release it with love and gratitude. And here I am. What do I want to choose moving forward? And you see that on the small scale and you see that on the big scale. You see that as an individual, you see it within the collective. I truly believe if everyone were to stop focusing on whatever is happening in governments, they wouldn't even exist anymore because suddenly they're no longer part of our reality and we're creating something completely new. Now, obviously, that's almost like utopia because,
We need some
people who would
utopia these days, though. A
we
little
do.
nirvana would be
We
lovely.
seriously do. I know. And people are like, yeah, but they're there and they are influencing in this way. And I'm just like, yes and no, but they are not holding me emotionally captive, which happens to a lot of people where they're so emotionally captive to what's happening on the outside that there is no room to expand, that there is no room to be creative and to think of new ideas and to think of opportunities and actually finding the yes in opportunities that present itself. Just like, with New Earth co-creators and creating a sacred economy. So many people are skeptical because they're so caught up in what's happening. Again, being emotionally held captive to what's happening, that they're missing out on extremely beautiful and powerful opportunities.
Hmm. I think that there's a duality here that's important to acknowledge, and that is that, politically or so forth, like it is important to participate to a small degree to make sure that,
Yeah.
whoever's quote unquote is in charge is being held accountable. We hope,
And
right?
then it's like,
However, where I
yeah,
think this plays out strongly, and where it's really important, is that the way we do it differently, speaking to what you're saying, if we just don't think about that, if we just don't put our attention on it, I think the way to put that in perspective is if we stop thinking that they're going to do anything differently than what they've been doing for years and years and decades
yeah,
now. Like, we have to stop thinking that they're going to save something, and that if it's this political party, somehow it's going to change or be different, because we have all the evidence, and it's very blatant these days to say, no, it's really the same. No matter what, it's the same.
yeah,
So this is our opportunity, and God bless them for being the perfect players on this theater of life right now, that is helping to wake individuals up to say, no, this does not make sense, this
yeah,
doesn't play out, this is not sustainable, these are not things that are really going to work. Because that gives us the opportunity then to do that thing, which is, what would we prefer? Who do you get to be, as we said last week, right?
yeah,
And what is the choice that you really have? So
yeah,
maybe right now the idea of what your dreams are is just too sort of like, not grounded or feeling tangible for people. So maybe
yeah.
maybe the next step is really just to say, what would you prefer? What would you prefer? How would you like today to go?
Well,
How would you
even just
like
like
this next
how would you
hour to
like to feel, right?
go?
How would you like to feel instead of how you're feeling now? And for me, the last months or two, I have been, going for walks almost every day, where I'm really tapping into gratitude over and over and over. And I'm, sending healing energy into the ground and connecting with Mother Earth. And that gives me a feeling of bliss. And that is what I want to take with me into every single, moment of the day. And I think just making room for little occasions like that, where we
Mhm.
can really feel how we want to choose to feel and continue to do it over and over, eventually it becomes our state of being. And from there, we can truly create something incredible and something powerful, where people want to join you. People like, I want what you have. How do you feel like this? How can you feel and think differently when we're here and, struggling and trying to survive? Well, you're actually not in a much different situation overall if you look at it from their perspective, right?
Mhm.
Again, it's just a shift in what can I do in the moment, that gets me to this higher place of awareness, this emotional experience that I really want to have, and from where I can create something new instead of fighting the old.
So to sum it all up really sweetly, I think it's like the past is there as a teacher,
Yeah,
and we can learn, how could I maybe have done that differently to get the outcome that would be better. We can learn that, and I think that's really a viable, great way to look at the past. But other than that, the past will only ever get us what it's already gotten us. And so therefore, as exciting as it can be to be like, ooh, okay, this is going to be totally different and I've never experienced this before. This is the invitation, is to start to create something that is fantastical, because it is what's in your heart to do. And if you have no idea what we're talking about with the New Earth co-creators, you can go to the website newearthcc.org, and find out about us. And if you know about us, awesome. We love you, and appreciate everybody who's here, who's listening to this, whether you're part or whether you're not. But certainly
yeah,
participate, because it is time. It's time. We know we can watch on the sidelines, or we can actively be into creating a world that we prefer to see.
yeah. And that we want to create for generations to come. It's not
Uh-huh.
just, about us. Yes, it is about us in the moment, right? I mean, we live here. So yeah, I would like to see changes, right?
Mhm.
And how we live and how we experience community in particular. But then again, it is also about generations to come. What do we want to leave? What is the legacy that we want to leave behind? And it's surely not finding the old, fighting the old. It is all about the new.
It's embracing a new reality. It's a
Yeah.
learning, in my opinion, how to come from love. My favorite quote, which is my favorite quote, is love is the answer and peace the result, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's it. It's not complicated, but it's not easy either. So the
No, it's actually
joy,
pretty simple, but yes, getting there is for a lot of people like, whoa, but how and what am I supposed to do?
Mhm.
But I think the focus is really a lot of people love to journal. I personally don't get much out of journaling. I try. I rather go out in nature, but if you just find one thing today that lights you up or that helps you to get to this place of bliss and joy, even if it's just for a little moment, I think that's the invitation that we want to give you today. Just find that. If it's going out in nature for 30 minutes, if it is writing, if it is drawing, anything that lights you up, even if it's just for 5 minutes, go there and do it as often as you can so that we no longer have to fight the old, but really being able to focus on the new with the experience, the energetic vibration of what we want to experience moving forward.
Awesome. And if bliss and joy seems really far out there for you guys, just the thing that makes you feel a little bit better. Just a little
Yeah,
bit better. Keep moving towards the thing that makes you feel a little bit better. So thank you. As always, it's a joy to sit here and hang out with you, girl, and hang out with everybody
stay with
here.
you. Yeah,
newearthcc.org. Check us out. And remember, together we rise.
very much so. Love you.
Peace.